Both Jake Paul and Bob Arum are extremely controversial figures in the boxing scene. Recently, the two clashed over women's boxing, with Bob Arum making some debatable remarks. Jake Paul didn't seem too impressed at anything the promoter was saying and criticized him. In this video, we're gonna go over Jake Paul and Bob Arum's feud. First, the Jake Paul and Bob Arum feud. Recently, the fight between Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano was confirmed, and people have been going crazy about it. The fight is predicted to be one of the biggest fights ever in women's boxing. However, it seems like promoter Bob Arum thinks otherwise. The promoter had some pretty misogynistic remarks about the whole event. He claimed that people don't pay attention to women's sports and that they shouldn't be given much importance. Right after saying this, Bob said that he doesn't want to be accused of being anti-women, even though he said something that was, well, straight up anti-women. But not too many people are surprised by his comments, considering he's already 90 years old, and his opinions are pretty outdated, to say the least. However, that didn't stop him from getting a lot of criticism from basically everyone in the boxing scene right now. But the person people were really surprised to see speak up was actually Jake Paul, the Jake Paul that's always stirring up trouble. Jake Paul has been involved in the co-promotion of the fight between Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, so maybe that's why he decided to say something. He said that people like Bob Arum are the reason why women haven't been given a fair share in many parts of society. He also referred to Arum as a 90-year-old dinosaur on Twitter. During an interview, Jake Paul continued to criticize Bob and even said that his time in boxing has come to an end. Bob Arum wasn't the only one Jake Paul has been in a feud with. Arguably the biggest one he's ever been in was probably with Dana White. After winning his fight against Tyron Woodley, Jake Paul was asked what he wanted to say to Dana White. At this point, White had already expressed his hate for Jake Paul and basically said that he knew that Jake wouldn't be winning the fight. However, Jake won, something he did not think was going to happen. Jake replied to the question by saying that he'd humiliated White as well as the entire UFC since they all thought he would lose. A while before this event, Jake had even accused him of being a cocaine addict, but Dana White wasn't just going to let all that shade slide. White said that he would take a cocaine test for the next 10 years to prove that he wasn't a cocaine addict, as long as Jake was willing to take a steroids test for the next 2 years. Jake Paul ended up replying to this by saying he would completely quit boxing if he would just start treating his UFC fighters fairly and increase their pay and get them health insurance. He also said that he would enter the US Anti-Doping Agency. To this, Dana White responded with a 2-minute video where he was roasting Jake and even said that he probably hired someone else to write the tweet for him. So Bob isn't really the first person in the boxing realm whose career Jake tried to end. Even though Jake Paul probably has more haters than supporters, everyone agrees that he's somehow pretty good at boxing. Jake has never lost a single one of his matches, despite being a rookie and going after some of the biggest names in the industry. His first big fight was against former MMA player Ben Askren, who was also his first real opponent instead of YouTubers or basketball players. Jake ended up winning the fight with ease during the first round, which was pretty unexpected because everyone thought he'd fail. The fight was actually quite controversial because Ben was a lot shorter than Jake, which can have a huge impact on the fight. This theory actually kind of makes sense, because why would he even fight Jake if he knew that he was at a clear disadvantage? After Ben Askren, Jake had a fight with another former MMA player, Tyron Woodley. Tyron was actually considered a very good MMA player in the past and had a lot of experience with boxing, so many people thought that he would win for sure. This ended up being one of the toughest fights Jake had ever been in. However, during the 6th round of their fight, Tyron fell straight on his face and lost the match. This proved that Jake could come after anyone and win, whether it was through money or through a fair fight, which is why he goes after anyone he wants, whether it's Bob Arum or Dana White. HEARN also spoke up against Bob Arum. Jake Paul wasn't the only one that was completely fed up with whatever Bob Arum was saying. HEARN wasn't having it either. Eddie is actually promoting Taylor in the Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano fight, which is probably why he decided to speak up. Eddie said that Bob's comments are a really bad look for ESPN. He also said that Bob's recent comments have encouraged him to make sure to retire the moment he turns 50 years old. Eddie thinks that Bob doesn't care anymore because he's too old now. He even said that if he's still a promoter by the time he's 60, then shoot me. Now that you know everything about the whole feud between Jake Paul and Bob Arum, here's some other related news to boxing. Forbes estimates that Jake Paul has made over $40 million. Recently, Forbes just revealed that they estimate Jake Paul has actually made over $40 million from his wins so far. On top of that, Jake was also the second on the highest paid YouTubers list after he made $5 million by using the popular video sharing service. With over $45 million from YouTube and boxing, makes him the 20th highest paid athlete of 2021. The only other boxer that was able to break into the top 50 most paid athletes was Canelo Alvarez, who was at the 48th spot with $34 million. Being at the 20th spot puts Jake Paul ahead of some of the most famous athletes like Novak Djokovic and even Phil Mickelson. All of these achievements at just 25 years old are insane, especially since Jake Paul just started boxing 4-ish years ago and has only been in 5 fights so far. Zolani Mahali passes away at just 44. It was reported on February 5th that the former junior featherweight champion had been shot and killed in his apartment building. Zolani, while being a pretty nice guy, always found himself in trouble one way or another. During the 1999 All-African Games, Zolani won a bronze so that he could qualify for the 2000 Sydney Olympics, but he ended up losing his chance to do so after he tested positive for marijuana. One of his biggest achievements was getting the national title during his 10th fight back in 2002. He even got 4 world titles under the International Boxing Organization World Boxing Federation in 3 different weight categories, from junior featherweight all the way to junior welterweight. Some of his more memorable wins wins were against Kaiser Mabuza and Ali Funeka. Both these wins were a huge deal for him back in the day. Zolani's last fight was against Julius Ndongo back in 2014, which he ended up losing. After this fight, he retired with 24 wins, 13 knockouts, and 6 losses, which was a solid record. Zolani Mahali was only 44 years old, which makes his passing even worse than it already was. According to some news outlets, someone had specifically hired Hitman to kill Zolani, although no one really knows the true details behind who killed him and what happened between the two. YouTuber Deji to make a boxing comeback against Alex Wasabi. YouTuber Deji, also well known as KSI's younger brother, has just announced that he will be coming back to boxing. Deji's first boxing match was against Jake Paul, which didn't end too well for him and ended up losing to him in the first round. Deji ended up getting a lot of criticism for his loss since many people thought that he didn't take the fight seriously. This is because Deji didn't seem like he was in the best shape for the fight, which is essential for a boxer. On top of that, Jake was way taller than him too, so it wasn't too hard for him to beat Deji during the first round. After this, Deji promised his fans that he would take his next match seriously and get into proper shape this time. His next match was with TikToker Vinny Hacker, and many people thought that Deji would finally get a win. However, he ended up losing for the exact same reason. This time, people don't have the highest hopes for Deji since he's broken the trust of his fans so many times. But he's been documenting his training journey, which looks pretty promising to many people. Only time will tell if Deji will actually win the fight against Alex Wasabi, or will he lose for the 3rd time in a row. That's a wrap for today's video. Do you think Jake Paul's gonna quit boxing? Make sure to let us know in the comments down below. As always, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and click the subscribe button for more videos like this one. We'll see you next time.